And so I'm going to introduce our next guest. Martina Massari is a researcher and architect from the University of Bologna, and she will talk about social innovation, urban heritage in research, and we'll talk about the ROP project. And so, Martina, yes, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Federica. Thank you, Jörg, Alissa, Ricarda, everyone from Hanover. It's a real pleasure to be here. I share my screen in a second. Let me know if it's visible and clear. I hope so.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I'm lost here. Okay, thank you so much. So as already mentioned, I will talk about the project because when I was invited and I was given this track title, I thought it would be interesting to speak a little bit about the result of this European project that I was involved in and just finished in the end of 2020. The name is ROC. And ROC stands for Regeneration and Optimization of Cultural Heritage in Creative and Knowledge Cities. So it is a research and innovation project. So it foresaw implementation of actions while doing research. So it was an applied research. It includes, of course, testing and validation of a series of solutions in several European cities in the form of small-scale prototyping, a tactical form, let's say in a pop-up form, as well as we already saw with Megan. So it foresaw kind of a laboratory logic, but the laboratory was in fact the city center of 10 European cities. We are talking here about circularity. What is more circular in ROC is the methodology. So it tried to implement an approach that went beyond the traditional design approach, where the ideation dimension comes first, and then the subsequent phases of implementation arise. But ROC tried to turn the findings of the research into immediate feedbacks. So activating a sort of self-reflection and recursive iterative procedure, where each design intervention that was pilot, that was micro-temporary, of course, was accompanied with a redefinition of the same categories through which it was interpreted. So understanding and performing especially urban heritage. ROC developed both a methodology and also a valid and effective operational management framework into the different realities, different urban realities where it was implemented. There were these 10 European cities, 7 of which were role model cities and 3 of which were replicator of such role models. So the attempt at the beginning was to find a balance between this sharing and method at the European perspective, but also the respect and the enhancement of the specificity of places meant in their multidimensional perspective in physical, social, political, memorial structure. So the idea consisted in implementing specific pilot actions while supported by specialized skills that were constantly redefined by especially supporting mutual transfer of knowledge between the institutional or cognitive knowledge and the skills of the citizens of the different implementation areas. So citizens meant as every actors intervening and operating in the city, whether they are permanent or temporary, such as, for example, students. So now I will talk a little bit about 2 cities that were part of the replicator ones, the city of Lisbon, the city of Bologna. Let's start with Bologna. Bologna chose as its area of experimentation, so to speak, the university area, which is called U area. It is a place where, probably most of you know it, where the futuristic, let's say, in the centuries-old city are constantly confronting each other, are constantly coalescing. And ROC, in a way, claimed to establish new bonds through the knowledge and experience of urban heritage, and new knowledge that were meant for the different bodies of this part of the city to coexist. So U area stands in the middle of a clash that has been going on for decades, let's say, between shopkeepers, students, residents, drug dealers, homeless people, club owners. Each of these targets were perceiving each other as an illegitimate presence. So it was a very conflicted situation. It is also an area of continuous change. And this change is due especially by its transitory nature and character. It has kind of a cyclical nature. And this circular nature lies also in the constant conflict that is unresolved between the different parties. So it's a very peculiar characteristic of this area. So ROC needed to accept these challenges of and these vulnerabilities also, and try to turn them into opportunities to design the territory exactly in the friction, in the tension that generates the difficult coexistence among all these different parties. So the main goal for this area of the project was to enlarge, to widen the panorama of actors involved in city making via urban heritage action. The first move, so to speak, was to get to know the area. So getting to know it together with all the actors that are normally passing through the area, but also the actors that normally do not participate in institutional participatory process. So for example, people with disability that enabled us participants to perceive and perform the public space and the public heritage of this part of the city in a different way, for example, by using different senses, using different means of not only perception, but also narration of this part of the city. So people with visual impairment or blind people helped us to understand how to visit the city by not only using our eyes, but also using other means. And also different collectives of activists that use different artistic form to express themselves enabled us to see differently also traditional institution related to culture. For example, here you see the municipal opera house, which was invaded by feminist movement on the left and also artistic performances on the right. And eventually, the most difficult target to engage were students. Because they are normally left out by the municipal activities of engagement and participation. So what the means that we used to involve them was through through building things, so through making pop-up infrastructure, pop-up places, and also provocatory intervention, as you can see on the right, by turning spaces that were neglected to pedestrian into lawns, into temporary lawns. So using this also provocative language to trigger discussion and to trigger transformation, and that's exactly what happened. Moving to Lisbon, Lisbon chose as an area of development and of experimentation Marvilla, the Marvilla district. This is which is surrounded by the wealthier and more expensive area in the city. It is in fact a rent gap where rents are lower than they could be. Lisbon evolved over the last 20 years through urban regeneration project, mass tourism, but Marvilla found itself in the middle, like an enclave, a ghetto. And it is now being regenerated with the classical ingredients of the regeneration, which is breweries, bakeries, heritage building converted into co-working spaces, creative industries. And then there's all, of course, the large murals on buildings, which are mostly public housing blocks. However, the neighborhood still houses a large majority of elderlies, for example, or children who do not work and do not study. And of course, also a great amount of empty buildings. And these empty buildings also are part of the former Expo district. And there's a feeling also of a large community bond, especially among all this generation. So another activities that ROC provided here was, of course, the one of getting to know this neighbor and this neighborhood. So in order to provide an alternative narration of this piece of city. And the first thing that was done was an ethnographic research. And in order to intervene kind of these free spaces left behind by these speculative forces, but that they were very much depository of high concentration of immaterial heritage. So this alternative narration was triggered by this cultural local outpost, which is the Library of Marvilla, a place where children and kids are always are growingly finding new opportunities also to develop startups, for example. And this alternative narration was built as a kind of plugin of the Library of Marvilla by this action called the Interpretative Center, Centro Interpretativo. It was basically a social museum built of the different voices of the elderlies in the neighborhood. And these memories, the interesting thing is that they were not only co-created, co-produced, but they were co-curated in a way. So it was a project of co-authorship of this collaborative social museum. And this idea of different narration was also perceived in this other action in Lisbon, that is by bibliogamers that use the languages of video game and of game jam sessions lasting nine days of designing video games to narrate differently the neighborhood of Marvilla, and this time provided by children, by kids. So another way to tell a story and to tell memory and to diffuse memory about this part of the city. So ROC ended at the end of 2020. So of course we went through a time of uncertainty. We still are. So we are now questioning what is the future of this experimental method put in place by the project, and what is the legacy of this temporary pop-up and micro action that we implemented. So definitely, what is the role of urban heritage as a key element around which to build an effective return to the experience of public spaces in historic city centers? So I will leave you with two reflections, with two final open questions that I still have in my mind. So ROC implemented a kind of hybrid and circular governance. And as most European projects do, my wonder now is, it is a good practice from a European project, another good practice from a European project, or could this really be a tool that is able to, in a way, shift and recalibrate this hierarchical relationship between the different institutional actors that are in charge of managing urban heritage? This is one of the questions. And then about the action. ROC, of course, didn't intervene in structural dimension of the cities, didn't change the physical part of the city, but it provided soft action. It provided more inspiration action to trigger different behavior towards citizens and towards also institutions. So this soft action, are they just good insights, good tips, good suggestion, or could they really be new ways to inform policies? Could they really be generator of more sustainable change? So definitely, are they systemic, or do they remain isolated from the very reason of the overall urban development process? I don't have an answer to this question, and I'm concluding here, but we try to reflect upon it in the final publication of ROC, which I leave you here. So what I can say in definitive is that in a period of 4 years of the development of this project, I think it's not possible to completely reshuffle the operational process and the also power processes that are strongly rooted around heritage in different cities. So I think this process of political transition and also spontaneous reorganization of different areas that is initiated by the project should continue for years, especially the observation of it, in order to try to radically rethink the dialogical dimension, especially between cultural offer, urban fabric, and community. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Martina, for this really nice project and presentation about these two cases in Bologna and Lisbon.